guess it should be working now. Yes. Hello. Okay. Good. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining today and for this webinar on legal for startups. We have here with me Jaideep Halbe, who will be covering on the different types of business organizations, what business types to choose, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each one of them, and touch upon taxation as well. And we also have with us Nawar Roy, who will be speaking to us today about intellectual property, importance of trademarks, copyrights, designs, what ways you could protect them, and also touch upon agreements and the importance of contracts and agreements in for startups. I hope you'll be enjoying the session, and if you have any questions, please feel free to use the question answer app, or you could just email us at info@selvam.in. I'll leave it over to Jaideep now. Jaideep?
Hello, everybody, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today. So there are two important things that I'm going to take care of. So I'm a chartered accountant, and we work with startups. So the first thing that we're going to touch upon is forms of business organization, and then we'll move on to taxation. Right. So the first thing when it comes to business organization is incorporating your business. Incorporating your business is somewhat similar to giving birth to your business. It's a very important milestone in any startup entrepreneur's life, not only for psychological reasons, but actually for legal reasons as well. So it is something that ought not to be taken very lightly. It ought to be given the amount of seriousness that it kind of deserves. So when to incorporate your business? That is a classic question that I get asked by people. And in my head, there is a rule of thumb that I use. And there are 2 points to that. The first is when you have firmed up what your business model or your idea is going to be. If you don't know what your business model is, or you are not sure about what your idea is, who is it going to help? How is it going to make money? What kind of a difference are you going to make in the world by giving birth to your business? In case you don't know the answers to these questions, it's probably better for you to keep it on hold, think about it a little more, sleep over it, and then incorporate your business. The second most important thing after you have decided that your business model and idea is set up is to see if you are willing to commit 3 years of your life to it minimum. It takes a long time for your business to become successful, and you have to give it the right amount of time before you are expected to see results. So if these two criteria are met, then you can incorporate your business. Also, another reason why it has to be done out in a thought out manner is because, well, setting up of a business involves cost. And at the same time, shutting down a business in India is not easy and is not cheap. It takes a fair bit of time and cost in order to shut down your entity. So that is something that has to be kept in mind. The next thing that we are going to discuss is types of business organizations. So right now in India, there are 5 forms of business organization that can be chosen. So the first one is a sole proprietary concern. The second one is a partnership firm. And then we have limited liability partnership. Then we have a private limited company. And then we have a one-person company. I often hear people use the words business and company interchangeably. Well, that's colloquially fine, but that's legally not all right, because every company is a business, but not every business is a company. There are 5 forms of business organization, like we just saw, that is possible in India. Now, let's delve a little deeper into what each of these forms of business organization actually mean, and then we will then finally conclude with how do we decide, based on our requirement, which form of business organization needs to be chosen. When you come to legal status, that's the first thing that we will discuss. In a sole proprietary business, the owner and the business do not have separate identities. They are one and the same thing. So you cannot say that the business is separate from the owner, because they're fused into one single ball, if you can call it that. All the other four forms of business organization, which is a partnership firm, a limited liability partnership, a private limited company, and a one-person company, all have distinct and separate legal identities. So the business has a separate identity, even in the eyes of income tax or in the eyes of the law, but the owners of the business are completely different. So what this essentially means is that in case there is a change in ownership of any of these businesses, the business can still go on in the same name and in the same format that it was, and the change in ownership does not affect the exterior of the business. It does affect the interior, but that is from a qualitative perspective, which we will not discuss today. But from a legal standpoint, the company keeps going on. So we'll wait. It takes time to talk there. All right. The next thing that we will discuss after legal status is liability. It is the fundamental differentiator between all of these forms of business organization, and it's extremely important for us to know what limited and unlimited liability is, because it's extremely important. I unfortunately cannot stress further on how important it is. You will get to know shortly. So in accounting parlance, liability essentially is when you owe somebody some money. So I'm going to demonstrate what limited and unlimited liability is by quoting an example. Let's assume you owe somebody 100 Indian rupees, but the total asset value of your business is 50 rupees. So what asset value basically means is all of the cash that you have in the drawer in office, plus all of the money that you have in the bank account of the company, plus all of the value that you can realize upon selling all of the assets of the company, like tables, furniture, chairs, computers, servers, etc. So that is what we call as the asset value of the business. Basically, the money that we can get if we sell that business entirely. So in case you have a liability of 100 and the asset value of only rupees 50, then one of two things can happen. You could be told, pay whatever you have and that's okay. Or you could be told, pay 50 rupees from your business and take another 50 out of your personal pocket and pay for it. Now, the former is what we call limited liability, wherein a business is allowed to declare bankruptcy, and then the business is told to pay everyone 50 rupees wherever 100 rupees are owed, and bankruptcy gets declared. In the other case of unlimited liability, the 100 rupees needs to be made whole, whether from the business or from the person, irrespective of that. All right. So, in my personal opinion, it's extremely important for you to have a business that has limited liability, because you don't want to put all of your personal assets on the line for your business. In a sense, when you drive home from a bankruptcy hearing, you still want to go home in the Jaguar that you came in. Now, once we have discussed what limited liability means, I would also like to talk to you now about which type of legal organization has what liability. So as the screen in front of you displays, a sole proprietary concern and a partnership firm both have unlimited liability. What this essentially means is if a partnership firm has 100 rupees to pay but only has 50 rupees to make the payment, they have all of the partners in the firm have to bring 50 rupees from their personal pocket to make the liability whole. That is the risk, and that is what is called as unlimited liability. But private limited companies, a limited liability partnership, and a one-person company, all three of these enjoy limited liability. That is exactly what the limited in the name essentially means. Well, now for today, it's slightly on the lighter side. The benefits of limited liability is that between Mr. Vijay Mallya and Mr. Donald Trump, they have 6 bankrupt companies, but they still have a great cache of personal assets like a Maserati and a Boeing jet, etc. And they were able to keep all of those because their business was separate and their personal assets were separate. The two never got intermixed thanks to what we call today as limited liability. I'm going to take a few minutes now to explain to you what is the difference between a one-person company and a private limited company. A one-person company is fairly new concept in India right now. It's less than a year old, and it gives the fundamental benefit of just a single person starting a company altogether. Even though this doesn't sound very exciting, it was a huge change when it was brought about a year and a half ago because it does not require two people anymore to form a company. A single person can form a company and enjoy all the benefits associated with it, including limited liability. The only restriction that a one person company, that's essentially OPC, has is that it cannot have a revenue of more than 2 crores a year. 2 crores is 20 million Indian rupees. If the amount of turnover exceeds that, the company is given 6 months' time in order to convert from a one person company to a regular private limited company. In every other aspect, a private limited company and a one person company are exactly the same. In any law or in any reference to a company essentially includes a one person company unless specifically stated otherwise. So a one person company is a great option for you if you're one person who doesn't really have a partner or co-founder but still wants to get things off the ground in the form of a company. Now that we have discussed, just to give you a quick recap, we have discussed as to the legal status of all the 5 forms of business organization. We have discussed what is the status of the liability that each of these organizations have. Now we will come down to the final point, which is decision. How do we decide what form of business organization we want to have? So there are, in my opinion, personal opinion, there are three criteria that make the decision for you. One of them is liability. Am I susceptible in my business to the risk of getting sued by someone? If the answer to that question is yes, then you must protect your personal interest and thereby set up a private limited company, an LLP, or a one person company. Essentially, protect your personal assets from being drawn into the entire business battle. But on the other hand, if you feel that you are not susceptible to legal suits on account of the nature of your business or profession, then, well, you can take the risk with unlimited liability. Speaking personally, I would never take the risk of unlimited liability, but, well, that's just me. But these are the facts. The decision can be yours. The second most important factor is the ability to raise venture capital money. Now, I will explain this in the subsequent slide, but take it as a rule of thumb for now for the next 3 minutes that if you want to get VC investment or you want to get equity investment by an individual investor or a company, then you need to be a private limited company. There are no two ways about it, and there is no discussion on the matter. The third point is cost of maintenance. Well, in India, it takes a fair bit of expense in give or take about 40,000 or 50,000 Indian rupees to maintain a private limited company, no matter whether there is operation in the company or not. This is because there are a few compliances that need to be done in the form of an audit, in the form of filing taxes, in the form of filing registrar of company returns, etc. So even though the business is not doing anything, all of these compliances have to be met, and all of these compliances come at a cost. So on the basis of these three, you make a final decision on which form of business organization you would prefer. As I said to you about 2 minutes ago, I'm going to now explain to you what is the connection between venture capital money and a company. Venture capitalists are those who put in money into your company at different stages in order to become owners of the company. So essentially, venture capitalists are taking a risk on your company by investing in the company. They are not looking for interest or any sort of periodic returns like a banker does, but all they are expecting is a return on the value of their investment. If they have put in 10 rupees today, they want to have the ability to take 40 rupees out of your business after X number of years. An investor always gets an exit, and by exit I mean cashing in on the value that the company has built. Now, that is only possible when you go for a further round of investment. So, in front of your screen, you can see the investor who has put in money at a seed round can exit at Series B. That is because there is a T+1 interval minimum that is followed, because if the investor leaves in the immediate next round, it creates a flutter in the market. It puts a bad impression about your company as if things are not right. So the rule of thumb is you always leave T+1. And at the end of it, exit for all investors happens when the company goes public. And when a company goes public, it's meant to go to what is called an initial public offering. And only a company can go to IPO. No one else can go to IPO. And hence, even the seed investor who's giving you the seed round is going to request you to incorporate a private limited company, because that is what gives him his ultimate exit. It is extremely important for us to consider a long-term approach when it comes to business and not a short-term approach. And hence, it is important to note that converting from one form of business organization today to another form of business organization is expensive, difficult, and again, in my personal opinion, a slightly penny-wise, pound-foolish approach. Hence, take an opinion of what your business wants to do in the next 3 to 5 years, and depending on that, choose a form of business organization that suits that. Finally, the rule of thumb, if you're doing a consulting or a professional services business that's not really going to get venture capital money, chances of you getting sued are low, then in that case, just incorporate a limited liability partnership, because it's much easier and cheaper to maintain. On the other hand, if you are a funding intensive business that is going to require some amount of venture capital money, it's always preferred to have a private limited company, as that's the only option. There are no two ways about it. So we're coming to the final part of my session before Mr. Navar Roy takes over, and that is about company taxes. So there are 3 taxes that I'm going to cover, and the first one is income tax. All of you are aware of what income tax is, I'm hoping. So for any business, the individual, the owner, pays a separate income tax and the company pays a separate income tax. It does not become double taxation. As a business, tax is paid on the profits of the company or the business, but not really on the sales. So there are expenses which are allowed as a deduction from the revenue in order to arrive at profit. Tax is paid on profit. Income tax is a direct tax. Now, what direct tax means is that the liability to pay the tax is on one person, and the same person has to make the payment of the same. When it comes to sole proprietary concerns, they enjoy the benefit of slab rate, which means from 0 to 2,50,000 Indian rupees, there is no tax. From 2,50,000 rupees to 5 lakh rupees, it's 10%. 5 lakh to 10 lakh is 20%, and beyond 10 lakhs is 30% rate of income tax. This is for financial year 15-16, and it changes every year. So you will have to check the year in which you are watching this. For every other form of business organization, there is a flat rate of tax at 30%. Next, we move on to what is called sales tax. Well, sales tax is levied on the goods that we sell. There are 2 types of sales taxes. One is called a value-added tax, and the other is called a central sales tax. VAT, as we call it, is required to be charged on goods sold within a particular state, while CST, or central sales tax as we call it, is required to be charged for goods sold from one state to another. It's important to keep in mind that sales tax is a state-based levy, so every state has different rates of taxes. Now, when it comes to sales tax, it's an indirect tax, unlike income tax, because the person who bears the tax is the consumer, us. When you buy a packet of Lay's, you pay tax on it, but the person who pays the tax to the government is the storekeeper. So because the liability to pay and the actual payment are done by 2 different people, we call it an indirect tax. The final part is service tax. Now, this is required to be paid for all services that are in India that are over 10 lakh Indian rupees. Export services, once again, are exempt from service tax because that is the government's method of promoting export of services so that foreign exchange comes into the country. Now, it's important to remember that though there is a 10 lakh exemption limit, in case you do a registration before you reach a 10 lakh limit, the 10 lakh limit goes out of the window. As soon as registration is done, sales tax is required to be paid by you. All right. So thank you so much for listening in. Now, I would request your patience as Mr. Nawar Roy is going to take over and talk to you about intellectual property, trademarks, patents, etc., and also the importance of contracts.
All right, thank you very much, Jaydeep. Jaydeep always does a phenomenal job at these presentations that we sort of host together, and it's almost always a tough act to follow him. But yeah, and so as Jaydeep was saying, I think he's covered a brief in terms of the incorporation aspects as well as tax. And what I will be dealing with today is on two specific aspects, one of which is intellectual property, and the other is generally about contracts and agreements. When it comes down to intellectual property, most of us know something about it. We hear about things in the newspaper. We understand that it's something that deals with rather large companies. It's usually seen as something that is done by all the big players in the market when there are issues with pharmaceutical patents, or if there is a major company that's suing another company for trademark infringement. Almost always the things that are covered are issues of big companies. But what the truth of the matter is, intellectual property affects each and every one of us. We come across this on a regular basis, and it could form a very important part of your business as a startup as well. You've most probably come across most streams of IP without really knowing about it. And that's what I've just decided to take you through, maybe 2 or 3 slides which just demonstrate that fact. Right, so for this particular screen that you should see on, this image that you should see on your screen, beg your pardon, is one is a bottle that says Birsali. Note that's not Bisleri. And the other one is a rather interesting image of Jerry, the character from Tom and Jerry, holding a matchstick. And the final one is not my phone. It's not a BlackBerry, but it's a Blueberry. And yeah, I'm just going to move on to the next page as well, which has similar issues. Yeah. So you have an image for an audio launch, which you can quite clearly see does not include Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow, nor does it have Keira Knightley, but somebody else instead. And on the right as well, you have 2 posters side by side, Batman Begins and Ravan. Well, you come across this all the time. It's generally seen as issues of copying, plagiarism, but the thing that it comes down to is each of these things, whether it was the character Jerry or if it is the character of Jack Sparrow, those were things that were created by someone. And the general position of law is that whoever creates those things, they require protection for what they have created, as well as they need the opportunity to stop someone who's trying to copy what they have which they have spent time trying to create. So although I said that IP is easiest explained in terms, it comes across all of us in our day-to-day lives, I've decided to take an example of a rather big company just to explain the different streams of IP involved. The case that I'm going to look at is Coca-Cola. I'm sure everybody's had a Coca-Cola once in their life. And so just to move on to the different aspects, using the Coke example, we have trademarks. Trademarks are literally marks that distinguish you in your trade. So if you're doing something in a particular business, you want to be identified as something unique. And the only thing that's unique is probably your name. So these things that the different aspects within Coca-Cola itself that are under the law of trademarks are the word. Say it could be a word, which is the word Coca-Cola. It could be the label in the way that the font has been well designed over there on your screen. Trademarks could also be slogans, like the Coke slogans, share happiness, or even a hashtag, which is Coke Zero, if that's what they're going to be using as a trademark. And a trademark could also be packaging, which is the case of the bottle for the Coke bottle as well. So trademarks could be words, labels, slogans, packaging, or any mark that distinguishes you in trade. It could even be a sound, it could be a smell, but anything that is unique to your product or your service which can be graphically represented, could be a trademark. Just moving on to the next stream of intellectual property, which is copyright. So copyright essentially protects the arts. It protects literary work, dramatic work, cinematographic work, sound recordings. So with specific reference to Coca-Cola, we have all their advertisements would be deemed artistic work, and all their advertisements that come up, well, the script for the advertisements would be deemed literary work, and the actual image that's put up, as is with the YouTube video here, would be deemed as a cinematographic work. So copyright essentially protects the arts. Moving on, we have the next stream of intellectual property, patents. Now, patents are something that get covered at pretty much any IP event that we have. Patents essentially protect inventions. So if you have come up with a unique product or a unique process which is new and is inventive and is not there in the market already and could probably be of potential commercial value, then one of the things that you're looking at is probably trying to protect that product or that process by getting a patent. Now, patents essentially grant you limited rights for a period of 20 years, but they give you exclusivity for that entire period of time. So that was with patents. And now we move on to designs. Designs and the law of designs protects the way a particular product looks. So in this case, it just protects the aesthetic appeal of a particular product. So even if we were to remove the words Coca-Cola off the image in front of you, you're definitely going to recognize this particular shape. This shape is so unique, even if you were blindfolded, in effect, you should be able to identify it as a Coke bottle. And because it's been created uniquely and because the image, because of the way that it looks is so unique, that has to be protected, and that can be protected through the streams of design law. Now, for the next stream of intellectual property that we have is trade secrets. Now, there are certain things that you want people to know, particularly when it comes down to patenting. You have to list out how your invention works and things like that. But if there are certain things that you want to keep secret and not let anyone know, the best possible thing would be to just protect it and not tell anyone. But clearly that's not something that's possible. So there are mechanisms that are in place to protect that. Say, for example, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola supposedly has merchandise 7X, which is part of their ingredients, which not many people know. Actually, very few people in the world are privy to that information. The entire list of ingredients and the way that it has been made was documented in paper and is actually sitting in a bank vault. It's been in a vault since 1925, and then at present it's at the World of Coca-Cola in Atlanta. So the way that it works is you protect trade secrets by governing the people who have this information by making them sign contracts so that they don't reveal this information to anyone. So that's with trade secrets. The next stream of intellectual property, I'm afraid I couldn't figure out any example with Coke in this, but one is geographical indicators and the other is semiconductor and integrated circuits layout designs. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but geographical indicators essentially provide protection to a particular type of product from a specific region in the world. Say, for example, the Assam tea or champagne from the region Champagne in France. These essentially these rights are given to a group of individuals who produce that particular product. So it essentially protects their rights. So nobody else growing tea in any other part of India or any other part of the world could sell their products claiming to be Assam tea, unless it was from that particular region. And the next stream that does protect this, particularly for hardware startups, which would be relevant, is the layout of semiconductors and integrated circuits. So in effect, the law provides protection for the manner of placement of all the components. Right, so that sort of just sums up the streams of intellectual property we have. That is trademarks, copyrights, patents, designs, trade secrets, GI or geographical indicators, and semiconductor and integrated circuits layout design. So the next question is, why is IP relevant to startups? Now, we've seen an example fairly recently. Okay, it's not very recent, it's from December, 6 months back or so. But this was a startup that had to shut down its merchandise business on the basis of copyright issues, as you can see the news article states. So essentially what they were allowing was people to upload an image that they had in mind and have that printed out on t-shirts, mugs, or anything that they would like, whatever product it was. Now the issue was a lot of people were putting up images like the earlier one with Jerry or even Batman Begins. And these are all proprietary rights of individuals who have created that. So if making copies of those images amounts to copyright infringement, which was why this particular startup was shut down as a result of that. But IP is not just important if you're starting up. Sometimes it could catch up with you at a later stage. So there are two examples that I've personally dealt with. One was a startup that had launched for about, for 4 years they were running. They had one particular brand and they were performing their services. Things were going clearly well for them. They received funding of about 1.5 crores. And at that junction, they decided to rebrand and launch a new brand name for it. And when they did, 2 weeks after they did launch that particular brand, they received a legal notice from a pharmaceutical company stating that they had used their trademark. The trademark in question was a particular product that the pharmaceutical company had, and it was just a name of their product. But they felt that this particular name that the startup was going to use was going to infringe their rights, and they wanted them stopped. Eventually, the pharmaceutical company was also able to get an injunction against them to actually stop using the trademark. So that's one of the maybe a cautionary tale of sorts. Another such incident was an Indian company that was developing mobile apps for US and UK clients of theirs. And in their contract that they had signed with their US clients, there was a clause in their contract on the issue of indemnity. So what it basically said, because they were eager to sign on the contract and get this and acquire this big client, they agreed that in the event the US company was sued for any reason with regard to the software, the Indian company would face liability. They were just keen on getting the deal. They signed whatever contract they were presented with. And unfortunately, the US company was in fact sued, and it ended up on the Indian company having to deal with the entire legality of it. So, and this was because the infringement suit was a patent infringement suit. So IP is, at the point when you're starting, it's important, and even once you go ahead with things, it's very important. So one of the next issues is why you can't escape IP in today's day and age. Now, point one is the internet is a level playing field. So earlier you could have a small brick and mortar shop in one small corner of the city that was selling jockey underwear, saying, say, Jockee instead of jockey. But they wouldn't get into trouble because jockey was too big and they couldn't find these guys in one corner of the country. But what happens with the internet is that when particularly with the advent of social media and each of your companies, you have that level of presence anywhere, you can build a huge customer base in no time. And at the same time, at the same speed that it pushes you up, you also get pushed into the crosshairs of those who own that IP. That is one aspect. The next aspect is Indian courts. Now, the general notion is that the Indian judicial system takes a fair bit of time to get things done. And while that still is true and things are being done to improve the scenario, on the issue of intellectual property, the courts are quite proactive. They actually do take issues fairly seriously and also are willing to grant injunctions against companies that have infringed intellectual property. And the third excuse that I commonly hear is that, I'm in India, you can't sue me. So they sort of tend to take a view that, okay, there is a company somewhere in the Netherlands that's used a particular trademark. I'm using it here in India. They can't touch me because I'm so far away from them. The truth is, India and the law that we do follow in terms of trademark is also to protect rights. If Indian clients aren't aware of that particular trademark, even if they're just based out of the Netherlands, they still would have a fairly good chance of suing and stopping someone in India who's copied the same name. So these are the three common excuses that we hear, but it's also incredibly relevant as to why you can't escape IP. So what do? You don't just sit around in a corner and huddle up and not do anything. What you do, in fact, is do an intellectual property audit, just to identify twofold, really. One is protection. You identify what you have, see if there's a way that you can protect it, and more importantly, how you can monopolize that and make money for you. And the second purpose is to see if you are infringing on somebody else's rights. So with a basic IP audit, you should be able to identify what you can protect, as well as make sure that you don't infringe somebody else's rights. There are certain, on the screen right now, you'll see just do-it-yourself kits where you can sort of go through. The IP India website on your screen right now is good for searches for trademarks that have been filed in India, trademarkia.com for the US. And the TM view on the link over there is good for European trademarks as well. The Copyright Office in India also takes online filing, so you can take a look at the link over there. And for general information on intellectual property, the government has a pretty robust website which you can use. Right, so that's with regard to intellectual property, the streams and the necessity to protect and monetize it. The last aspect of today's program is going to be on contracts, and I'm just going to briefly run you through them. Contracts or agreements are basically documents that document relationships. It essentially sort of factors in when two people agree, two people or parties or businesses or whatever two entities are there, when they agree on certain terms, and it's just to execute those terms. So as a startup, there are certain things that the relationships that I've sort of broken them down into would be one between you and the other owners or investors, between you and the people working for you, and between you and your vendors or clients. And the interesting thing is, I've dealt with quite a few people who sort of feel comfortable taking agreements off the internet. The only issue with that is that each contract is specific to what those people agreed. So you may not necessarily agree to the same things that the contract says which you've taken down. So that's with reference to that. And I'm just moving on to So just to give you a sort of example as to the types of agreements that you may be dealing with, between you and the other owners, if you're the only person heading the startup, good on you, well done. If you are getting into it with other people, then you probably need a founder's agreement just to sort of dictate the terms as to what happens when you guys grow, what happens if one of you isn't performing, things like that. When it comes down to shareholders agreements, so once you've incorporated, how are the rights going to be split, who's getting what shares, how are you creating stock for your employees. Same thing with investments, with each round of investment that you get that Jaideep was covering earlier. the way that the entire investment scheme works, all of that has to be drafted in an agreement. The next aspect is between you and the people working for you. So this is employment agreements. Always you need an agreement with anyone that you hire for simple things, at least from the IP perspective, to make sure that everything that they've created stays with you as opposed to them. Another thing about confidentiality, as a startup, one of the things you're looking at is creating something unique, and if that's taken away and gets started off by your own employees, that can be rather painful, and you want to stop that. That's also done through contracts. And the last stream is between your company or you and your clients or your service providers. So if you are a software development company, between your clients or vice versa, if you're developing an app and need to engage somebody to develop it for you, all those terms, in terms of including the commercials as well as who owns what happens with each stream, all those are covered by agreements and contracts. I think with that, we're sort of at the end of our session. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you do have questions, yeah, I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Selvam, who's moderating this.
Thank you very much, Nawaz, Jaideep. I hope you guys had a very informative session. I do see a lot of questions coming up on the question and answer app. I'm just going to try and address each and every question. So just give me a minute. Okay. So the first question here I see is from Balaji, which says we are a 2-month-old private limited e-commerce startup. We make roughly less than 30 transactions per month. Apart from VAT filing, what are the other stuffs we need to take care of in terms of maintaining accounts? Cherry?
Yeah, well, hi, Balaji. Well, that's actually a very nice question because you're asking about maintaining accounts, which is something that most people don't really concern themselves with. And yes, it is absolutely possible for you to do this on your own. If you have 30 transactions per month, you can always use a cloud-based accounting software like QuickBooks or Cashew or Xero or Zoho Books. There are a bunch of things out there. I personally would recommend QuickBooks because, well, it's very well developed right now. So you can go ahead and maintain your books on that. And also with VAT filing, you say 30 transactions, but unfortunately you haven't mentioned the amount. If you are in Tamil Nadu, you need to understand that if you have transactions of less than 5 lakhs per year in terms of sales, or sales plus purchase being less than 10 lakhs, then you are exempt from VAT. So you don't even need to do the VAT filing. So that's pretty much it. Do your accounts, keep all track of all bills, etc., and give it to your auditor at the end of it, and he's going to be extremely happy, and you're also going to be certain that your compliance is in order.
Thanks, Jaideep. The next question is from Rangan Satyamurthy. His question is, hey, I'm doing online business, B2B. I need the information regarding the tax. What is taxation when sales is done from manufacturer to distributor and distributor to retailer?
Hi, Rangan. Well, thanks for listening in. Your question's going to be a little tricky to answer over the internet, primarily because you say you're doing an online business. So let me answer both possibilities. Possibility A is you could be doing business the way Flipkart is, wherein Flipkart is just an e-commerce platform. There are multiple sellers who are selling products via the e-commerce platform called called Flipkart, I beg your pardon, and to the end customer. So that as an e-commerce platform, you don't really need any sort of tax registration because all you're doing is providing a service. You're not selling goods, so sales tax does not apply to you. On the other hand, if you are a person who is buying goods from someone and then selling them via the internet or physically, then you need to take care of sales tax. So if you are in the business of buying and selling, do register for sales tax pending the amount. And if you are just an online platform, then you need to register on service tax, but you don't really need to register for any sales tax. All right, so apart from income tax, these are the two other taxes that you need to look after. So just look into what exactly you are doing and do it accordingly. Right. Thank you.
So the next question is from Syed Sujid. He wants to register a partnership firm. He started last month himself. It's a sports website, and it would turn about 50 lakhs with an annual turnover. Where's the question? So, okay. Uh, I would like to know all registrations we need. Okay.
All right, so hi Sayed. You have a partnership firm. Another thing that I didn't mention in the seminar that I want to appraise you of is partnership firm on its own does not have the ability to sue anybody. So in case you want to ever take legal action against someone, you will not be in a position to file suit. So what I suggest as a remedy on the matter is please go to the sub-registrar office. For most of Chennai, it's in Saidapet. Go to the office and get what is called a certificate of registration of partnership firms. That is the certificate that gives you the benefit of suing other people. So that was not your question, but as soon as I saw partnership firm, I wanted to appraise you of that. Well, now you are making a turnover of 50 lakhs. I'm not exactly sure if that is, again, are you facilitating transactions worth 50 lakhs via your website, which in e-commerce terms is called gross merchandise value, or if you are selling worth 50 lakhs? In any case, if you are just facilitating transactions, you definitely need to register for service tax. So please get that done. But if you are doing sale of goods, you do need to register for VAT. Now, there's also a third option. If you are doing goods plus, I mean, if you're doing goods plus also getting ad revenue, then ad revenue is a service. Sale of goods is covered under sales tax, and sale of advertising space is covered under service tax. So then you will have to do both. So I hope I've answered your question. Do write back in case I haven't. Um, we will go to the next question. It's by Madhu Reddy. He says, we're planning to start an online business. The company is registered in Illinois, USA. Can we sell our services in India without registered branch office? Well, see, Madhu, good question. The only problem of doing that is corporate income tax is at 30%, like I said, for every single company that is domiciled or incorporated in India. The moment you act as a representative of your Illinois company in the US, it becomes a foreign company. And the tax for a foreign company is at 40%. So you will end up paying 10% more income tax sitting in India if you don't have an Indian entity. So you can do it without a branch office, but it might end up costing you a lot more in terms of tax. But that decision is something that you can take care of. So we will then go to the next question. We have someone from.
No, just scroll up.
Yeah. So we have Gopal Krishnan who has asked us a question. He says, we're just starting up a new e-commerce marketplace for artisans. Since the products are mainly handicraft, do we need to verify whether sellers have registered with VAT CST, since most of them might be individuals? Gopal, fantastic question. Let me first tell you this, all right? So when it comes to handicrafts and artisans, maybe the volume of sale in terms of rupee terms might not be too high. So check it out with them. If one individual person is selling for more than 5 lakh rupees a year, then yes, he does need to get a registration from the VAT authorities. But if he isn't, then that's not really going to be required. So that is something that you will have to check. But if they do pass the threshold, then whether it is handicrafts or anything else, you do need to get a VAT registration. On the other hand, you might also want to check out with a VAT professional, or you might want to drop me an email. I can take that offline. There are certain goods which are exempt from value added tax. Those goods are vegetables, milk, basically anything that is a daily necessity, things that don't get shut down in a strike. That's a very good way for you to know what are essential commodities according to the government. So those commodities are exempt from VAT. So all we have to do is find out if handicrafts are also exempt. If they are exempt, there's nothing for you to worry about. But if they aren't, you might have to go do a registration. All right, so we have another question from Subramanya Venkatesh and Ravi. He asks, what is the difference between a sole proprietary person and a one-person prop and a one-person company? Well, I think, at the risk of nitpicking at your English, there is nothing called a sole proprietary company. As a single individual without involving any partner, you can set up two forms of business organization. One of them are called a one person company, and the other is called a sole proprietary concern. So there is nothing called a sole proprietary company. That is a hybrid that the government has not yet thought of. Uh, so, uh, so the liability is different because of the form in which it is organized. A one-person company is a private limited company incorporated under the Companies Act 2013, and the law states that there is limited liability. But when it comes to a sole proprietary concern, there is no law or statute, and hence, since the personal and business isn't really separate, it is one and the same thing. So you cannot restrict the liability of a sole proprietor to business because there is no distinction between him and the business. So I hope I have answered that question. We have the next question coming in from Syed again. Thank you for asking two questions. So he says, we're based in Bangalore and I have 5 employees working with me. Do I need to register for shops and establishment, professional tax, or anything else? Secondly, he also says some nice stuff about me. He says, yes, you're right. We come under service tax, not under sales because we don't sell anything. We run Google AdSense. Perfect for Google AdSense, service tax, go for it. Now, when it comes to 5 employees working with you, now Shops and Establishment Act has nothing to do with the sheer number of employees. You need to register under Shops and Establishment Act with your local corporation. You're in Bangalore, so that will be the Karnataka's corporation thing. You will have to register with them irrespective of the number of employees. When it comes to professional tax, PF and ESI, PF being Provident Fund and ESI being Employee State Insurance, there is a threshold beyond which you need to register. So for ESI, that threshold is 10 employees. So if you guys have 10 employees who are working with you or more, then you need to register for ESI. ESI is only applicable if the person's salary is less than 15,000 rupees a month. It is basically set up to protect those who are not extremely highly paid from maltreatment by the employer. On the other hand, Provident Fund is applicable if you have more than 20 employees and PF needs to be paid irrespective of the amount of salary that each one of these people are getting. Professional tax, again, the rules vary from state to state because it is a statewide levy and not really a national levy. So you might have to check with the Karnataka authorities or drop me an email and I will be able to get back to you on that as I don't have the information on Karnataka on my fingertips. Thank you. All right, there's a very interesting question, hence I might skip the queue and take that. That is from, again, Subramanya Venkatesh and Ravi. He asks, in India, is it mandatory for the startups to register the company? Well, again, sorry, but I'm going to nitpick on that English right there. There is no thing as, when it comes to a company, it is always registered. You cannot have an unregistered company because you only have a company after the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, which what we call MCA, gives you its blessing in the form of a certificate of incorporation. So the concept of unregistered company does not exist. But keeping aside the English, if your question is, in India, is it mandatory for startups to register their business? The answer is no. All right, that would be a restriction on your rights. If you want to do business as a sole proprietor, if you want to do business as a partnership firm, you don't necessarily need any registration. You are free to do that as long as you weigh the pros and cons of each form of business organization. You can go ahead and register or not register, whatever be the case. There is no such mandatory thing. But again, since you have mentioned startups, I'd like to say that it's extremely important for most startups to get VC funding. So if your startup is in the ballpark of getting VC funding, then you have to go with a private limited company and nothing else, like I mentioned. So all the best with that. All right, so the next question that I'm going to take is from Mr. Vignesh B. He says, I'm interested in starting organic food company. Whom I need to approach and how to start? Well, Vignesh, without me getting into the qualitative aspects of, do your market research and is there a value proposition, that's not the point of this session. But all I'm going to say is decide first of all, based on the above presentation, what sort of a business entity you want to form. What is the sort of legal organization that you need? And depending on the legal organization, then you can go and approach a chartered accountant or a lawyer or a company secretary. All three of these do company incorporations. If you're in Chennai, we will be more than happy to do it for you. But in any case, before you go to a service provider, now that you have invested some time in patiently listening to us, go through it, map it to your business, see what form of business organization suits you best, and then go to the service provider and tell him this is what you want. You come across as a person with clarity and they will appreciate you for it. So thank you for listening and that question. The next question I'm going to take is one by Devi C. She says, I want to start an LLP concern. May I know the procedure for that? Well, Devi, this hangout might not be the right place for me to tell you all of that because, well, there are a lot of things. So if you could drop us an email, then I will be more than happy to give you the procedure. But I don't think it's something that I can wrap up in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to have to pass on that. I hope you don't mind. Just write to me and I'll be more than happy to do it for you. All right, so this question I'm taking, it's very nice and I'm going to take it only for the benefit of everyone else. It says, if we have any more questions, can we contact you? And please may I know when I can contact you, where I can contact you, sorry. So most definitely Mr. Raja Selvam, Mr. Navar Roy, and myself, Jaideep, are more than happy to field all of your questions. We're only doing this to spread information to people, so we would be failing in our duty if we didn't help you after this. So if you can note down our email IDs, mine would be hello, HELLO, @Halbe, HALB for Bombay, E for elephant, innovations, innovations.com. So that would be my email ID. And for intellectual property related queries, you can write to info, that's INFO, @Selvam, SELVAMAND, which is and Selvam again .in. So that's info @selvamanselvam.in. We'll be more than happy to answer your questions. All three of us are easily accessible on email, actually better on email than on the phone. So I'd request you to drop in a note and we'll get back to you. Thank you. So this is a very interesting question that I would like to pass on to my colleague, Mr. Navar Roy, who's a lawyer. So this question is by Praveen Kumar, and it states that I'm planning to start up, need some suggestions on how to start, I mean with legal documentation. Again, Praveen, very good job. You're thinking of legal documentation right before starting and not like the majority of the populace who thinks about it after they end up with some issue. So over to Mr. Roy to answer that one.
All right, thanks, Jaideep. But Praveen, actually, I think Jaideep's done a fairly, extremely good job actually of explaining what to go about it. In terms of legalities, it's straightforward. Like he said, one of the things you actually need to decide is the sort of entity that you want to form and how to go about it, because each of those require different documentation. So as Jaideep said, one of the main things is to identify what sort of business whether you want to be a sole proprietorship or if you want to be a company or how you want to go about it. And on the basis of that, those documents sort of change. But so yeah, you can let us know, like he said, you can contact us on any of the email IDs that he sent so that we can help you out in detail or even help you out with figuring out what it is that you want to create.
Super. Thank you, Mr. Roy. The next question again is on trademarks. I'm going to let Mr. Roy take that. And Mr. Jay asks, my firm has a product should we register a trademark for name, logo, and other aspects of the brand? So he basically wants to know what sort of IP protection he can use. So, Mr. Roy.
Yeah, Jay, thank you very much for the question. Well, in terms of your product, yes, there are certain things that you can protect. One is the name itself, that is the word in which it's written, as well as the logo, which is the way that it is written, if it is in a specific font, as well as if you've got a tagline along with your product, that's also something that you can register as a trademark. So typically, trademark registration is for one particular type of trademark, either the word, logo, or the word or logo slogan, and for a particular class of product or service. So since you've got a product, it will be within one of the product classes that you register to use for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Well, now I'm going to take one from Mr. Sanket Kasar. What he basically asks is, does an OPC incur the same amount of expense for maintaining it, which is audit fee and register of companies filing fee and income tax return fee, etc., when compared to a private limited company? Well, Sanket, the answer very correctly is yes, 100%. If I were an auditor, well, I am an auditor, but as looking at it from an auditor's perspective, the work that is required, the time that goes in, and the effort that goes in is the same for an OPC as it is for a private limited company. As I had mentioned before, the only difference between the two is that one director, one shareholder, and 2 crore revenue cap. Apart from this, there is no difference. So theoretically speaking, the cost would be the same. Also, I would like to appraise you all that the cost that I have, the cost of maintaining it differs from auditor to auditor. There is no standard rate. It is not like an iPhone 5S that costs X. It varies from person to person because it's a professionalized, personalized service for you. So I hope I've answered that question okay for you. Again, Mr. Subramanya Venkatesan Ravi asks, he has a manufacturing company and what other acts and provisions apply? Well, manufacturing law, company compliance is something that is a very, very serious matter. It's quite an extensive field. Off the top of my head, again, at the risk of not being completely thorough with this, I will tell you a couple of compliances that are required are Factories Act. So there is an act called the Factories Act that determines basically the way everything is done in a factory, right from whether the food should be cooked on premise or not, what facilities should be provided to the employees. In case there are more than X number of women, then what are the separate women related facilities that need to be provided? What is the ceiling on the number of hours that a factory worker can work even after receiving overtime? Just because you're paying overtime doesn't mean they can work for eternity. There is a cap on the number of hours that they can work. There are certain requirements with regard to displaying the responsible person's name and the person who is responsible for everything in the factory. You have to get a bunch of permissions, you have to get environmental clearance, etc. So that is again something that cannot be told to you over the Google Hangout, unfortunately, but it is an extremely intense field, so it requires a separate discussion altogether. So I'll take that probably offline if you're interested. Thank you. I'm going to take one from Balaji right now. He says, we have the VAT CST number registered, and however, yes, less than rupees 5 lakhs per year it will be. In that case, aren't we supposed to file VAT return? Well, the thing is, if you had not registered for VAT, I would have very clearly given you the advice that, don't worry about it, don't do anything. But now that you have registered for VAT, you will have to file a return, otherwise you will be held in contempt for not having filed the return. So just file the return and say that it is exempt. So you will have to check with a local VAT consultant for you. Just check and then he will let you know whether it's exempt or how you should file the return for exemption. Thank you. All right, there's another one that we have from Rajeshwar Ghonse. So basically what Rajeshwar asks us is, we're a product development company, we provide software development services, and we also have some software products. Well, interesting. Let me take this in the form of a comparison with Tally. I think all of you will be familiar with Tally. Tally is basically an accounting software. So if you have ever bought Tally, you will realize that the invoice has both service tax and VAT. So answering your question, Rajeshwar, if you are providing software developmental services, then you need to have a service tax registration done. In case you're providing a software product or selling a software license to the end user, then just like Tally does, you have to do both service tax registration as well as a sales tax registration, and you need to charge both. All right. Okay, so the Madhu Reddy basically says, wants us to repeat our email IDs. So what I will do is I'm just going to shift our screen to where our email IDs are contained, and you can basically take a look at that. So that's the screen. Those are our email IDs. So that's info@selvam&selvam.in and or rather hello@harbeinnovations.com. Feel free to write to us. I'm going to leave this on for a second or two so that you guys can make note. All right, so I'm going to shift from the screen right now. I hope you guys have made note. All right, here's the last question that we will take. Unfortunately, we have a time constraint. You've noted down our IDs. Feel free to bombard with emails. We're okay. The last question here is from Mr. Gulshan Iyer. He says, can you enlighten a bit about the process to transfer from a registered partnership firm to a private limited company? Okay, accounts being not maintained very well is a problem whether you have any one of the 5 forms of business organization. So on that, I'm only going to tell you, you got to do it, man, or you got to give it to someone like us who will do it for you. Well, see, the transfer between a partnership firm and private limited company is something that I have done a couple of times. And it's what is called a Part 9 conversion. Part 9 is the part under the Companies Act that demonstrates how this needs to be done. Let me tell you this at the risk of sounding very unprofessional. It's an extremely painful process. Normally, to incorporate a private limited company, you need just 2 directors and 2 shareholders. But when you do a Part 9 conversion, you need 7 directors and 7 shareholders. So it becomes physically impossible for a private limited company to find 7 people to hold shares and to be directors. So that's just one of the things. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Secondly, there are also tax issues that might arise. Transferring the business from a partnership firm to a private limited company in the realm of income tax is taken as transfer of business from one party to another, and that will be taxed. Even though it's going from one pocket of yours to another, the government has to receive its cut. I mean, tax. Cut makes it sound very wrong, but tax. So that again, from a tax structuring perspective, it's extremely difficult to do. So what I would recommend to you is just shut down your partnership firm, start a private limited company, and just continue doing business in that. Don't really go into the conversion because it's extremely, extremely painful. All right, so I hope that's answered your question.
So I do see some more questions there, but I think we're just running out of time. Subramaniam, Venkateshan, Ravi, Syed, Gulshan again. I think I'll take these. We'll take these questions offline. You could always leave us an email, and we'll be happy to get back to you. I'm just going to leave you with the screen once again for you guys to note down the email address. It's just going to be there for a couple of minutes before we go. So thank you so much for all of you joining us today. I hope you guys had a informative session. And as always, as I said earlier in Jaideep, you guys can just reach out to us. I'll be happy to connect you to Jaideep or Nawar, whoever, depending on what kind of questions you have. So, yep. So thank you so much. Thanks, Nawar. Thanks, Jaideep, for joining with us today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Selvam. So I hope you guys had a good time. Thank you so much for the patience. I just saw my timer. It's been 1 hour and 8 minutes. So thank you so much for listening to us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, as lawyers and chartered accountants, we have a particular affinity to talk a fair bit. So thank you for putting up with all of that. All right.
Thank you.